We're coming to the end, and have been for quite a while, before recent events, we're coming to the end of the big media empires. And it's a bit like that line from Life of Brian, what's the Roman Empire ever done for us? Aqueducts, education, sanitation, a couple of things. And nevertheless, we hate being colonised. There's been a lot of good to the media empires in general. There's been a lot of good to the Murdoch media empire, and remains a lot of good in it as well. But nevertheless, we are coming to the end of it, and there are people who are yearning for the post-colonial era. The post-colonial era may well be more difficult and more uncomfortable than we expect. So, for example, the media empires have given us a practical expression to freedom of speech. They've given us accountability of other powerful figures, while being arguably not sufficiently accountable themselves. And we are at risk of losing that, not only because of the News of the World scandal, but because of the collapse of business models and longer-term technological trends. And then within that sort of big overarching sort of historical pattern, which is more about technology than individuals, there's the question of how Murdoch has used his power and how his lieutenants have used his power. And that too is a two-sided story. There is both good and bad in it.
Are you suggesting that the culture that gave rise to the News of the World circumstance, under the new media paradigm, is less likely because it's too dissipated? Do you actually need a central, top-down thing to actually create that sort of culture?
Yes, I think so. It doesn't mean that there won't be other pathologies and other problems with more dissipated power. But I think the idea of a newsroom, I was talking to somebody just the other day who talked about how in the News of the World newsroom they used to, if they were writing about the Iraq War, they'd bring in sand and camouflage stuff and so on to create the atmosphere. Now that idea of the story being everything, getting the story being absolutely everything, overwhelming all other considerations, that takes big corporate cultures to be sustainable over long periods of time and to build. And if we look for the roots of the News of the World crisis, I'm sure we have to go back, at least a decade, probably longer than that, which implies institutions that are long-standing, institutions with considerable power. So we're not going to see that problem, I think, in the new media world. We'll see other problems, I'm sure.